Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Knocked Conscious. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Naresh Vissa. He is the founder of Krish Media and Marketing. It was an amazing conversation. I met him at Freedom Fest. We tried to get a conversation there, but we decided to table it until we got back in our own homes. But just had that conversation. It was amazing. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it. All right, Naresh. Naresh Vissa, correct? Not Visa?
That's perfect. Vissa, yeah, absolutely.
Vissa. Excellent. Naresh, so happy that you joined us on Not Conscious. We're going to get right to it. Really quickly, we met at Freedom Fest last week. I have not slept a wink. You have no idea what my week's been like. I don't know if you're an MMA fan. Are you an MMA fan at all?
I know there was a big fight on Saturday night.
Well, you know, like the old UFC stuff back in the
Yeah,
day?
yeah.
There's a guy named Pat Miletich who's a UFC champion and he coaches champions.
Okay.
He came to my house for a barbecue on Tuesday, yesterday.
Oh wow.
Literally, and
For
that's
what? How
through
did he
Freedom
know? How does
Fest.
he know you?
It
Oh, Freedom Fest.
totally through Freedom Fest. Absolutely through the injected booth, through the people through injected. So
Oh,
we'll talk about
oh
all that. But
wow.
I'm just telling you, man, my week has been crazy. I talked to Balby Azarian for 2 hours on Monday. I had a podcast earlier today with Kelly Patrick. So let's get into it. Right away at Freedom Fest, I spoke with Amy Bond of PERC. And there was this California bill, 1955, and literally had a conversation with her on Thursday. It's on the government's desk that it will ban the information of children transitioning to their parents. So they are banned from knowing. The parents are banned from knowing. Have you heard about this? Because Amy was talking about it, and on Monday, Miss I think Gavin signed it into law.
Mhm.
I think because
Yep.
it was on his desk.
It's
So
a law. It's a
I
law now.
I'd love for you to start talking about that because that's going to start going into that other part that we want to talk about, which is what you focus on as well.
I mean, I focus on a lot of different things, so we
I know,
we can
I
really
know
talk.
that's the thing. We only have an hour, man. It's crazy
Yeah.
because just listening, I know we're going to talk many times over. So
Yeah.
please
Well,
share your thoughts.
here. So regarding the transgender bill, first off, this goes back to what our founding fathers wanted and really how they framed the Constitution. And our founding fathers wanted limited government. So, first off, this gender stuff, this was not even a top 1,000 issue in 1783, 1776, 1783. This was not even a top that, like, this literally, they were too busy fighting for freedom. They were too busy, all these, our founding fathers, every single one of them was a convicted felon. And people wonder right now, how can a convicted felon run for president? The reason is because our founding fathers were all convicted felons. Many of them, after attaining freedom, many of them died penniless. They spent everything and they sacrificed everything. So, this talk about transgender stuff, if we were to go back to 1776 or 1783, the founding fathers would look at us and be like, why is this even a topic? We have a country to start and to run. So, first off, this bill is specifically about transgender kids, not transgender adults. Those are two very different population samples. If you're an adult and by law it's 18 and up, I would make the case. I have two kids. It would be more like 21 and up for in
I'd
my
actually
household.
argue 25 for the brain to fully mature, but I would once again, I think we're libertarian. We could delve into that also a little bit deeper after, but I'd love to hear your
Yeah,
initial.
well, the bottom line is there's a big difference between a 10-year-old and a 21-year-old, even a 10-year-old and an 18-year-old. So there's pre-puberty and post-puberty. Generally, puberty is done by the time you turn 18. Transgenderism in children at the age of, let's say, 10 is a mental health disorder. And this is backed up by science, by the DSM so the DSM is the psychiatric manual. It's called the DSM. And right now, I believe that we're at the DSM 5, and the DSM 6 is going to
That's
be
correct.
coming out soon. So we're at the DSM-5 right now. In DSM-1 through 4, there is an actual mental health disorder called gender identity disorder, GID. It is an actual psychiatric disorder. In DSM-5, because of, you can call it pressure, wokeism, the radical left, they changed it from using that term disorder to gender dysphoria. The bottom line is it is still, gender dysphoria is still a disorder. So when people say transgenderism is a mental health disorder, this is scientifically proved. This is a scientific fact. It is in, read the DSM, read all about gender identity disorder, about gender dysphoria, and it is a serious illness. This is not something to go out and celebrate and take off your clothes and drink alcohol and yeah, hooray. This is a serious disorder because transgender people, not just transgender children, tend to have higher unemployment rates, tend to have higher homelessness rates, tend to have higher incarceration rates. Most importantly, the biggest statistic is they tend to have way higher suicide attempt rates and suicide rates. And it's almost half, it's almost 50%. It's above 40% as far as suicide attempt rates go. And the argument from the left is, oh, well, all of these unemployment and suicide rates and suicide attempts, it's because society isn't treating them properly. And so they feel like they need to commit suicide because they don't fit into society. And there is partial truth in that, but at the end of the day, this is a psychiatric disorder, and especially in children, the compassionate thing to do would not be like what they're doing in California, to embrace it. The compassionate thing to do for a 10-year-old child, I have a 4.5-year-old child, and now I heard this disorder is starting younger and younger at 6, 7 years of age. The compassionate thing to do is to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and to seek treatment to see, hey, is this a fad or is this for real? And if it is for real, you go through puberty, you go through you go through the counseling, you go through puberty, and when you're 18 years old by law, then you're free to make the decision. The child who is now an adult is free to make the decision whether they want to move forward with the transition and whatnot. So the problem with this bill is that it circumnavigates the parents, and now you're leaving the decision to the state. Because if the parents have
State
no
is
idea,
becoming your parent when it should be your fucking child. I'm
the
sick of
nanny
it. I'm
state,
sick of it.
the nanny
I'm
state,
just over it. Yeah.
they literally become, that is a prime example of the nanny state, where you hire a nanny for your 3-month old child, but now, or for your 3-month-old child while you go off to work, now you have a 13-year-old child, you're off at work, you have no idea that your kid is transgender, and they're doing all this stuff that the government, they're making the decisions, they're deciding the treatments, if any, they're making the decisions on your behalf. Parents determine the future of their children. Parents determine the education of their children, not the public school system, not the Department of Education. So the most important thing to take away, to glean from this, is gender identity disorder, gender dysphoria, is a mental health disorder according to the DSM. That is the official psychiatric manual. We are at the DSM-5. I've heard rumors that they're even going to get rid of gender dysphoria in the DSM-6.
I think they're going to. That's what I was about to say, because people will argue. This is look, I am 100% on board exactly what you're saying, but people are going to argue that like homosexuality was in the DSM-1, I think, as a disorder or something. So look, this is you and I. We can logically talk about it from a very stoic, sensible point of view. If you are under X age, you are not yet capable of that decision. You are also not capable of a parent making that decision for you, because there is an actual impedance to the natural process. That impedance alone indicates abuse of children. That is a non-starter in my opinion. And I don't have children. I just think children should be protected. At that point, I would even argue that children could dress as the other gender if they choose, because that really doesn't harm anything. It doesn't impede with the natural process. So anything short of blockers, therapies, mutilations, I'm good. So what are your thoughts about those things?
Well, look, the medical industry, as we saw during the pandemic, they're a business, and there's a big fight right now to have insurance companies cover these treatments. So previously, the insurance companies didn't cover any of these treatments. So the doctors were getting paid cash, the surgeons, the OBGYNs, the urologists, the plastic surgeons, the endocrinologists, they're getting paid in hard cash. The moment insurance starts accepting these ubiquitously, then you're going to see mass marketing from the doctors. And when I say marketing, I don't mean nice little commercials on TV. I mean the serious, hey, the only solution to fix this is the puberty blocker or the surgery. That's how they, I mean,
Yep.
it's like
This
the
will
easiest.
save you. This will.
Exactly. It is the easiest marketing profession in the world because you put on that white coat, you have an MD at the end of your name, and all of a
Yep.
sudden people they listen to you. Your average patient knows next to nothing. They don't even they'll never they're probably hearing the DSM for the first time in this interview. By the way, it stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So it's
Yes,
scary.
and to that point, like you saw Spike, I think, at Freedom Fest, and here it is. Once again, we have the state looking at a child, or the corporate capture of the state looking at the child as a dollar sign.
As a
That's
dollar
what
sign.
they see. They see the hormone therapy or the pills, then the blockers, then the therapies, then the then the surgeries, then the post treatment, right? Everything is a treatment. They don't want to cure anything. They just want to extend this suffering. It's
Well,
ridiculous to
once
me.
you have a
And
patient, you hook them on for life because it's
right,
it's
exactly.
very difficult to transition. It's not like you just go have a surgery. Like I can just go have a surgery tomorrow and all of a sudden I'm a woman. Like this is a
Right.
long process, and they
Yeah.
can hook you on to the medication, especially when you start a child young. They can hook you on to the
It-
medication.
yeah.
Look, my whole thing, again, parents need to make this decision. Even in the case of abortions, for example, I do believe that there should be exceptions for abortion, and people keep talking about the three exceptions that Reagan advocated for, which is rape, incest, and the health of the mother. But I would add a fourth one, which is the health of the baby, because if you're giving birth to a dead baby, there's really no point in going forward with the pregnancy. Which I know people personally who decided to move forward. It was completely their choice, which is great. But they said, "Hey, our baby is going to be born dead, but we're okay with that. We want to move forward with the birth out of because it deserves its 2 seconds of life or however long of life it had." That's fine. That would be a fourth one, and a fifth one that I would add, which ties into this transgender stuff, is uh, teenage pregnancies. So when you're a teenager, you're still a minor, and so your parent or your guardian should be the one making the decision whether to keep the baby or to get rid of the baby. It should not be up to
It's
a
an interesting
14.
perspective. I like that. I like
It,
that
it
you've had a really interesting thought on that. That makes
yeah,
it that makes a
and
lot. Yeah.
it should not be up to a 14-year-old to make that decision because a lot of 14-year-olds, I don't have any statistics on this, but they're
I
obviously
don't
going to
even think
think
they know what happened to get that way. Like
exactly.
I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm gonna what
They
did I know at 14, man? You met that kid Steven, the volunteer at Freedom Fest. That kid was talking about Thomas Sowell. And here I am going at 14. I
Yeah,
didn't even know like I didn't know my butt from a hole in the ground, right? So
I didn't know even more than that when I was 14. I,
yeah.
but but
Uh,
but 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 with that being said, this goes back because the parents should be the ones deciding, and we're all for freedom and liberty. But when you're a minor, when you're a kid, you are the property of your parental guardians or your legal guardians. So they should be in the know and they should be making that decision, just like with
and
these puberty blockers and
to the extent that we know that the guardians are not doing anything duplicitous or anything as well, right? Like obviously if they were doing something we knew about it, we would then intervene in some aspect at least
well, I
and
will
address
say
the
this.
situation.
because somebody for who I know, or many people I know on the left say, look, parents are stupid. That's why the government has to step in and
Yeah, because the
make
government's so smart.
that's why the government has to step in and make these decisions, because parents are dumb. Most parents should not be parents. They should have never had kids. And initially, when I heard that, I thought, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. But now that I am a parent and I meet other parents, there's a little bit of merit to that. But the
Well,
government
there
should
is.
not.
But I mean, come on. There's a bell curve of how we disperse across how it
Yes.
is, and we're kind of more here than we are on the edges. You know what I mean? It's just how it is.
But the bottom line is, you cannot ascertain, or you cannot force this law on all parents, because there are some very good parents out there, and they should be making these decisions for
Right.
their
You
kids.
can't
That's the
mandate that
important.
stuff.
So
No,
you
you
cannot
just can't.
mandate it across the board. And when it
And
comes
if I could,
to,
and
yeah,
if oh, go ahead. Good.
yeah, well, again, with the transgender stuff, we haven't even touched on puberty, because puberty is such a transformative process. I'm sure there are people who you've met, friends' kids, or maybe you remember when you were a kid, maybe you went to school with a kid in elementary school, and then you didn't you went to a different middle school and a different high school, and then you saw them like in college, and you're like, whoa, like you're a completely different person. uh, Puberty is such a transformative process. Those years
Yeah.
from, let's say, 12 to 17, you won't even recognize somebody, and to be making a decision on the future of someone's life and their fertility and their gender and their sexuality. There are two genders, by the way. That's why it's called gender identity disorder. There are two genders. Gender was not even a term until the 1960s, when the transgender movement, the
Those
LGBTQ,
three French bastards.
when they
Yeah,
came
I
on, and
know.
they created this whole gender thing, because it was just sex. It was just, you're
Uh-huh.
either a male or a
Those
female. And then
sociologists, right?
there were actually, there were
Ugh.
actual hybrids, where you could have be born with a special chromosome, and very rare cases where you could be not a male or a female. I mean, very, very rare. But there was not this
Yeah.
concept of, I can just pick my gender. And so the 60s brought,
Nor hold on, nor could you be a fucking bird
yeah,
or a dog
or a
or
walrus.
a ferret or some other weird. I heard some stuff, man. I saw some stuff. I can't
But
even
but but
imagine.
but
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 anyway,
here you bring up a good point, because this again brings up a really good topic about, we stick with the transgender stuff, but something that
no,
people
we
don't
don't need
talk
to do
enough
that. Let's
about.
talk conceptually at a 50,000 foot level because I think trans is just a subset of all the other stuff that we're talking about. It's all
It is.
cultural. And
It
so
is,
let's
but
talk
there
about
is
your
one
point.
thing,
Let's go to your, yeah.
but there is one thing that's important, and that is, yeah, okay, you go through all this, you do the transition. Now you're a different gender. And by the way, there are now apparently 109 different genders. So it's not male or female. I said there are two
Yeah.
genders. There
Yeah.
apparent you
I
can
know.
look this up, and it's very
Yeah. Yeah.
difficult. I call us
Facebook
ignorant,
has,
call
I
us
think, at least
uneducated.
70 on there.
Yeah, oh really? I haven't even
Yeah.
checked that. I remember when they only had two back in like 20,
A- And by the way, my girlfriend's flying back from an education conference right now in Chicago, and she texted me the number of times that I heard Chan Zuckerberg Foundation is too many to count.
Yeah. Well,
Welcome to corporate capture, late stage capitalism, ladies and gentlemen.
the transition is important, because just because you successfully transition, and this is something that Caitlyn Jenner, who is, you can call her a politician in California, this is something that she talks about. After you're done with all that, the puberty blockers and the medications and the surgeries, and you feel comfortable, well, now all of a sudden, guys' night out becomes girls' night out. And how are those girls going to treat you? Are they going to treat you? Are you going to find your people? Are your people going to be your gender, or are your people going to be other transgenders who are not able to fit in? Because I'll tell you right now, I have a guys' night out in our neighborhood, like our zip code. It's a small group of guys, and we go out maybe once a month or once every 2 months. And if a transgender male wanted to join our group, I'd say, yeah, that's fine. But I know for a fact that they just would not fit in, because this
Right.
is a somewhat alpha male group. Let's call it that. All dads, uh, all, very successful, somewhat alpha. Like it's a stereotypical guys' night out. And yeah, you're welcome to come if you're a transgender male, but you're not going to fit in. I hate to say it, like come, but you're probably not going to come back. And that's a huge problem. It's a really, really big problem. Just imagine, just try it for a day. Just dress up as a woman and go try to make women friends. Go try to hang out with women just for fun. See if you can succeed at it.
Well, personally, I think I make a handsome woman. So I probably do okay.
I would not do okay because
Yeah.
I know nothing about the nails and
Yeah,
the
no, I'm just messing with you.
balayage hair. No,
Yeah,
no,
for sure.
I know that. I know you're messing, but
But
I've been a man my
yeah,
entire life, and to become a woman one day, to wake up and become a woman, and then
yeah.
ask me to just fit in, and it's difficult. And then dating men, I mean, forget about it. Like if I'm a man, I become a woman, and now all of a sudden I have to date. Like it's
Yeah,
I can't do it. And most
absolutely.
of these people, again, this has been statistically proven. This is another major reason why so many people go through this process, and then they end up regretting it. They get the hysterectomy done, they get the surgery, and then after puberty, they're 23, 24 years old, and they completely regret it. And this is why I say in my household it's 21 and up. In US government it's 18 and up. But if you're 21 and up, you're a grown adult, you're free to do whatever you want and you take personal responsibility for it. I'm perfectly okay with that. I
Yeah, I
would
like that.
that's just how I feel about it, and I think that's a
Yeah.
very libertarian perspective as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because the whole point is like you do you, as long as what you do doesn't really affect anyone else. Obviously, as a child, it does affect. As an adult, you can have that choice. With the freedoms, this is a beautiful thing about what we want to talk about libertarian 2 points. With the freedoms comes responsibility of that choice. There is causality. If you make a decision, there's going to be some result of that decision. If you decide to make this decision to transition, that is certainly on you, but unfortunately, the downside is if you can't really regret and reverse something like to that extent where it becomes that. The second point is just in general is we should just be able to allow people to be a little more understanding with it, but also be firm, like almost firm, but with like a velvet glove, right? Like in a weird way, because sometimes a little too much pressure creates the Ron Paul blowback. Because I think socially, in addition to what we're going to talk about next, China uh, is going to be the blowback of the social people. I'm a Gen Xer, so when I was different, we were very much forced to not be different. We were very much bullied and whatever. And I think our generation is the one that became resentful. Then we became into the institutions. To your point, we were captured by that Russian guy through the
Yep.
indoctrination, and then they said, fine, you didn't like me to be me as a kid, I will make your children like I was as a kid. And I think that's part of it, and a lot of people don't really talk about that much, but I actually see it because I'm from that generation and kind of see it from a 30-degree angle. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, I think the first thing is the Chinese Communist Party is behind the fact that we've spent what 20 minutes, 25 minutes talking about transgender issues in children, which actually is not. Again, I said this wouldn't have been a top 1,000 issue for our founding fathers. This is not even a top 50 issue, maybe even a top 100 issue for most people in the United States. That's just a fact of the matter. Parents here in Florida are not waking up every morning thinking about, is my child going to become transgender today? They're thinking about their jobs. They're thinking about dropping their kids off at school. They're thinking about their health, working out. So it's jobs, healthcare, education, saving for retirement, money, family, faith, God. That's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about these issues. And what's happened is you have a fringe minority on the left who has hijacked, because this is a, a sexy topic to talk about, even though
Squeaky wheel. Yeah.
it's not applicable to most Americans. This whole transgender bathroom issue in North Carolina, what was it, 5 years ago or so? They got, like, the NBA All-Star game was canceled because of this bill that was passed, and you had coaches in the NBA who fell, drank the Kool-Aid and fell for it, and It's like literally, like seriously, like look how small these rallies are. Look how small, like these people are so small, such a small fraction of not even 1% of the population, and they get the biggest microphone. They get the biggest microphone and they get to take over the airwaves. And I think a major reason is because of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party is the strongest network of propaganda in the world. It's stronger than whatever the United States can do with its military. It's stronger than whatever Russia did 20, 30, 40, actually not 20, 30 or 40 years ago. The Chinese
I'd say
Communist,
they were the most successful of indoctrination. I mean, you look how strong, like even from Mao, right? Like how that revolution happened and how devastating that was, but how people were completely captured by the ideology.
well, the USSR fell in the early 90s, around 1991, 1992.
91, right? Yep.
Um,
Yep.
it was like December 91. Some people say January 92. So
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happened
yeah.
was the head of the Chinese Communist Party, his name was Jiang, Jiang. Jiang Zemin came out and he said the Cold War is over, but a new Cold War is starting between China and the United States. That like, he actually said that, like not in
I
those exact.
remember. I actually remember that speech. I'm old enough. I'm pushing 50, my friend. I got 15 years on you, and I've done one millionth of what you've accomplished. Because we'll talk about that before we call it. But go
Well,
ahead.
well, he came out and said that I was only 2 years old when it happened, so I don't remember, maybe 3 years
Right.
old.
I'm saying I
Uh,
literally lived through that. I was 91. Let's see. I'm 17, man, and I was just enlisting in the military at that point. So yeah,
okay,
that would be me. I didn't get in. I failed the physical, but I really wanted to die for this country. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate your earnestness to do that, and thanks for whatever service that you were able to do. But
I,
anyway,
I didn't. I
the
didn't. But go ahead.
the prime
There's real
minister of
servicemen out there.
there are the prime minister came out and said a new Cold War is starting with the United States, and we are still in that Cold War today. And the people here in the United States don't even know it because they are a part of it. They're so brainwashed by it that they don't even know that they are in the middle of this war. From the food that we eat, the medications that we're prescribed, the vaccines that we take, the viruses that we get, the education from the colleges all the way down to elementary school, the social media that we're intaking, the mainstream news media, and the advertisements that we are intaking. The Chinese Communist Party has ruled over our lives, and they are dictating what should be talked about, what our priorities should be. Again, we don't even know it. The fact that we talk for 30 minutes about transgenderism shows that the Chinese Communist Party is winning because they are the ones pushing. They don't push it to their people. This is not this whole transgender ideology is not a thing in China because they control their
Yeah.
population and they start their kids really young. By the time their kids are
Yeah.
kindergartners, they're already at like a fifth or sixth grade level in reading and
Yeah, and I even
math.
understand their TikTok. I think you have to actually do like word and puzzles in order to get to the next like video for a certain portion. It's almost instead of doing an advertisement for us, instead of feeding us with more mindless mush, they actually
Yeah,
make them do like thinking word problems in between
word problems
to,
in
to
between.
keep
They're
them.
cooking food by kindergarten. They're cutting vegetables. I mean, they're just so far ahead. And then what they're trying to do here in the
And that's
United States,
cultural. I mean, that is an impressive cultural feat for
it is
certain.
it is, and there are a lot of positives to it. Look, there are a lot of negatives to communism. Of course, we know that.
There, oh,
And
100%.
in
Yeah,
fact,
just
this is
ask
a
my
very
mom.
this is going to
Yeah.
end up being a very negative interview about the Chinese Communist Party. But there are a lot of positives, just like there were a lot of positives that came out
Right. But
in
you and I
the
are pushing the Overton window of freedom, and
yep,
communism isn't freedom. So that
nope,
it's already kind of a moot point. We're already going in knowing what the answer is,
exactly.
right? So let's just break down why we got to that answer. I guess is really the best way to
Yeah,
go
and
to
and
talk about
and so people are just wondering. People who are listening are probably like, "What? Like the stuff that I'm consuming is China somehow involved? What? Like the vitamins that I take, China's involved, and
it.
the
Toilet
vaccines that I
paper.
took, the toilet paper? Yes, and this is why Donald
Remember,
Trump was
there's a
the first.
shortage. We couldn't wipe our asses for months.
Very likely, the toilet paper was manufactured in China, just like the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine,
Yeah.
they created the virus and they manufactured the vaccine. The Chinese Communist Party did, and and so
On that point, Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein was at Freedom Fest. And I remember the April 2020 talk with Rogan about the email saying, this cleavage point thing, this cleavage site thing just doesn't look of natural origin or something. And that for me was immediately was the tick. And that was right a month after they had shut down Vegas. I remember that.
Well, for me, it was again the Chinese Communist Party. This was supposed to be the Wuhan virus. A lot of people called it the China virus, and because we've called the Marburg virus, the West Nile virus, the Zika virus, the
Spanish flu.
Spanish flu. The list goes on and on and on and on.
Right.
Where the country of origin or the place of origin has always been the nomenclature for these viruses, and it was the Chinese Communist Party who was already in bed with the mainstream news media through advertisements, through investments. Remember, China is the largest debt holder of the United States. China owns the most number of government bonds out of anyone else, US government bonds. So, how does China attack its enemies? Well, the first thing it does is it takes stakes in its enemies, whether it's buying US real estate. Their goal was to buy as much real estate as possible, to own as much US debt as possible, because if you own somebody financially, then they're hooked onto you. If you want to destroy a family's life,
That is a new slavery. That is the
that is
true way to look at
absolutely a
that.
new slavery. And if you want to destroy a family's life, give them free money. Give them free money, and then 2 years later, not even 2 years later, they get so addicted to your
Purpose
money
goes away.
that their purpose
Right.
goes away, and they will get addicted to your money, and they will do
Yep.
anything so that you can keep giving them that money and you will own them. And that's what the Chinese Communist Party does with our educational institutions when they open up these China centers in major campuses, when they're foreign exchange programs, study abroad programs, even degree programs in China. They can dictate what's being taught and how it's being taught, not just in China, but in the United States.
Right.
How do they infiltrate our lower level? Well, first they they're able to donate through the back door, through a very complex back door. They're able to donate to politicians. They don't outright pay off. I mean, sometimes in the case of the Bidens, they'll just outright pay off the politician, the Chinese Communist Party, through some entity. But through many back doors, it'll find its way back into a super PAC or into some type of campaign donation. Going back to lower schools, the social media, lower school teachers are now so consumed by social media. They get content, they get ideas through TikTok, through Instagram and Facebook and X, YouTube, and the Chinese Communist Party, whether through taking stakes in these, like in the case of TikTok, they own TikTok, ByteDance. They actually own that. They take big stakes through the back door once again. They take big stakes in companies like Meta and Google. How do they do that? Well, one major reason, one major way they do it is by investing in asset managers like BlackRock. And they do this through Chinese entities. So they'll invest in these large funds like BlackRock. The three biggest are BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard.
I know. I know. I struggle. I'll talk to you offline about that.
They'll invest
Go
in
ahead.
these funds, and these funds take huge stakes. You
Yeah.
can look up for yourself Meta's largest stakeholders,
Well, look how
Google's
much
largest
BlackRock
stakeholders.
purchased of Ukrainian land. No one's even talking about that. While hundreds of thousands, it's not tens of thousands. Let's not kid ourselves. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead over this thing. And all BlackRock's doing is shoveling up the breadbasket that has now been poisoned by mercury in the munitions, in addition to unexploded munitions, in addition from the cluster bombs that we admonished Putin using, yet use ourselves. Like, this is the hypocrisy of these things. And I go from like 0 to 100, and then I calm it down. So all right, I'm good again.
It's absolute hypocrisy, but at the same time, it's look, the Chinese Communist Party, these aren't a bunch of idiots, just like the
Right.
Russian communists are they're not
No,
idiots. They're
they
very
they have
sharp
a
people,
really good 50-year plan. They are focused on a
super focused.
long-term solution to their problems.
Super focused, and they send, as Trump says, Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala and Venezuela. They're not sending us their best people. China does send their best people to the United States.
Yeah.
They send those people here for either on like tech contracts or for school, like graduate school or even
Science.
undergrad. They'll science,
Yep.
math, technology. They'll come here. They'll get our education. They'll see what the Americans are doing, and then they go back to China, and then
Did
they
you hear
thrive
how
over.
they did that? Did you ever hear Brett Weinstein
No,
dissect how they did that?
no.
Oh, so basically, it was once again we have to be a little culpable for our part in this, in the capitalist part, because the capitalists have now taken over a lot of the lobbyists and a lot of the government parts. But the science changed to where they started importing scientists from abroad because it would lower the rate for scientists here. So they did it once again, immigration, to lower the costs of scientists in America to be used. And by doing so, China took advantage of that policy and flooded the universities with their students because they are not stupid. They're like, oh, this is a great idea. And it's a really interesting one. I recommend people look at the one with Brett Weinstein where he dissects that part about the number of scientists and how foreign, just general, but specifically China, because it is specifically a problem with China. They specifically were infiltrated using these policies against us.
Well, again, just really smart. And in the USSR, there was the head of the KGB did an interview with 60 Minutes again when I was like 2 years old. He did an interview and he said that hold on one second. What is it? Oh. So he said that if you want to take over a country, you don't, especially the United States, you don't take over the country with military and arms and bombs, and you're not going to win. The way that you take over a country is by infiltrating their education system, especially the lower education system, and then you work your way up. Because if you do that, then you can brainwash.
It was Yuri Bezmenov, right? You're talking about
Yuri Bezmenov said that,
yeah,
and
yeah. Okay, I
and
just want
that's
to
how.
I just want to do it for the audience because we need to have these context pieces. So
Yep, yep. And if you want to take over a country, you can brainwash those kids at a young age. They grow up, they become adults, they become communists, they become these people who you watch on TV. They end up becoming transgender and marching for Palestine. Uh, that's what they grow up to become. And he said that in the early 90s. Those kids today are like me. They're now in their mid 30s, and some of them do procreate, and they're going to keep that cycle running, hopefully. Hopefully, meaning for that's what this guy said. That's how you take over a country. That's how you take over a nation. That's why it was the Cold War, because they knew we got no chance. Like, we're not going to fight the U.S.
right.
with our military. The Chinese know we're
And
not
and
going
that
to.
was the thing, but they did it physically. They actually had physical agents here. What China's done is create TikTok
TikTok, yeah,
and create
virtual
this
agents,
algorithm
digital
that takes
agents.
our
Yeah,
complete attention the entire
yeah.
time. And now they're able to indoctrinate us digitally without needing to even be physically in your space in your classroom. It's a pretty impressive way that they've done this. So
It's
can I
not
ask you a
just
really
it's
quick
not
question?
just science. It's not just science, virology. We saw what they did with
Right.
the pandemic,
Absolutely.
with
Yeah.
the I like calling it the Wuhan virus, or what it is actually called, severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus disease 2.
SARS-CoV-2, right?
SARS 2. SARS
SARS-CoV-2.
2. They created that. And you said you
Right.
heard this Brett Weinstein in 2020. I actually talked to infectious disease doctors in private practice, because if you work for a corporation or you work for an academic, Chinese Communist Party is involved, or you're basically just hooked on this job and you just don't know. But the private practice people who are passionate about their jobs, I talked to many of them, and they said coronavirus, because I was like, what is this? I've never heard of coronavirus. What is this? And they said coronavirus has been around for decades upon decades, since like the 1930s is when it was first animal on animal contact, then it went from animal to humans, and then human to human
Yep.
contact was
Yep.
around the 30s or so, if I'm not mistaken. And they said it's been around forever, and for it to mutate, because there was a, if they would, again, China calls it COVID, and the entire world picked up COVID when it should be SARS 2, because remember SARS 1 in 2001. But there was a coronavirus
I do.
18, there was a COVID 18, there was a COVID 17. So to mutate from the coronavirus 18 to what they call COVID-19 is almost statistically impossible. They said you should never rule it out. I mean, there's like such a 0.000 goes on forever, chance.
Well, look,
But
biology is a son of a gun at times, but let's not kid ourselves. It didn't even look that way under a microscope. It looked like it was attached in some unique way from what the initial reports that I had, in hindsight, had a chance to.
Well, the experienced people said the only way it could have mutated, their medical opinion was it had to have been created in a lab. That's the only way it could have gain of function research in a lab. And most of the ones I talked to were like, look, we don't think this was intentional. We think they were doing research in the lab and it escaped. And they were like, oh, shoot. And this global pandemic was unleashed. And still, our government is trying to cover it up and not take responsibility for it, not say outright, hey, it was in a lab, it escaped the lab. They're still going with the bat theory. They are kind of changing, but I mean,
well, yeah, they're kind of changing. It's only because it doesn't matter anymore. They're just going to bleed it till the statute of limitations run out. Then they're going to flood the market with, oh my gosh, shocking new developments in the COVID drama situation.
Yep. So
that's how they play it.
That's how they play it. In the Chinese Communist Party, like I said, I touched on education, I touched on social media, I touched on how they're involved with owning our debt, owning real estate, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, the positions that they take through Chinese investment management firms. They're able to get board seats. BlackRock, these large companies are able to get board seats on major corporations like Disney, for example, like Nike. They're able to get board seats so that it is okay to use Uyghur slave labor, child slave labor, to make cars, to make shoes. They are able to use, or not use. They are able to come out with Disney movies in the United States that will have a subliminal pro LGBTQ or pro transgender, or it's just something that's not appropriate for a 5-year-old. They're able to get that G rating put in the United States, but then when they air it in China, they cut that part out for their people there. They are able to have a license over, hey, you should make a movie about X, Y, and Z because we have these board seats. So that's the amount of power.
And if not, they'll just steal your intellectual property, right?
That too. And they have way better scientists, way better AI people, way better mathematicians, IT people, engineers, I mean, you name it, media, like
they do have a unitary focus, and it is impressive in the things that can be accomplished. We're just not enjoying the style at which it's being accomplished.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we touched on all the different areas that the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah. If I could touch on one more about SARS, right? Let's do it. In September, I think it was like September 19th or 20th, that the Wuhan database suddenly went offline. And I don't think it's been up again. And they said it was some hack that they had, right?
Of course,
and that was right. Of course we know that. And then October is actually when the Wuhan games started. That's when the actual Wuhan really allegedly spread, because Italy, that turned out, had a lot of competitors that had brought it back, because Italy, remember, was a real hot spot early.
Italy was like the first when it went mainstream. Italy was when it went mainstream. Look, I could talk COVID for I've done interviews for like 4 hours on COVID because I stayed on top of everything from beginning to end. And even a lot of libertarians may not like what I have to say, but I don't want to say I was pro-vaccine, but I was very much, hey, look, this vaccine does work. It does do somewhat of a job. And the data shows that it does mitigate the effects. Now, they were just completely wrong. Part of it is they were just terrible communicators, and they should have hired me as a communications consultant, because I could have helped.
Yeah, well, we could argue that, though, because like, how do you explain the negative effects versus the positive? We're talking risk reward here, and then we'd go age group and lower, right? Obviously, I know you would have looked at it logically that way, because I did not vaccinate, and I'm diabetic. I'm type 2 diabetic. I did not vaccinate. I supplemented, and I got healthier. I got my blood levels in check. But I did tell, I was sub 50, but I did say, to your point, I was like, from what it seems, anyone 50 or older should take it. That's what I said. From what it seems, anyone 50-year-old should take it. And that's where I
I
stood
wasn't
until I saw
even,
the other
yeah,
stuff in hindsight.
I wasn't even, I said anybody above 60 should take
Oh,
it.
okay,
And only,
sure.
so I would have actually recommended that you, because you said you were diabetic, I would have,
Correct.
anybody with a pre-existing condition would have taken,
Yep.
and I
Yep.
say this,
I understand that
if
as
I
well.
was
And
single,
yeah.
if I was
Yeah.
single, I wouldn't have taken it. But I was taking care of my son, and I
Yes.
just couldn't afford to lose 3 weeks of my time because my brother got it, I had family members get it, and they were
I agree
knocked out for
100%. I
and I
agree
said, you know
100%.
what?
Yeah.
But the other thing that nobody talks about is they treated all three vaccines the same. There's a huge difference between Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson and Johnson. Two of them are mRNA vaccines, and one of them was a traditional
Right.
adenovirus vaccine. I want the traditional adenovirus vaccine because those are
I think
the
they tainted
vaccines.
it.
They did.
I think they
There was
tainted
no
it.
demand. Oh, you think they tainted that one
Yeah,
specifically?
because remember they pulled Johnson for its side effects or whatever, but they had stored it in proper temperatures and things like that. And because it was a very different virus, they needed mRNA to stick. I'm so like I have pulled the veil back so many different ways, and
Yeah.
I only see the motive of the dollar. I only see the motive of the control, and I
Yeah.
hate that I see that, but it's like all signs point to
Yeah.
yes. You know what I mean?
Well, I took J&J. Whether it was why I heard from some pharmacists again, they didn't have 100% confidence. They're like, yeah, that J&J is like water. It's just like it's not a real thing. And I say, hey, look, I'll get my vaccine card, and I don't want the mRNA. I got that. I got the J&J booster. Then they pulled it,
Cool.
and so unfortunately, I look back and I'm like, man, maybe I shouldn't have gotten that. I got the bivalent Pfizer vaccine. I look back on that. Hey, what can you do? If I were to go back again, I would not have gotten that one. Again, that's a
Right.
vaccine that
But
the
we
Chinese
look, we
government
make
funded.
choices and then we just deal with them. And that's the thing is we can have these open conversations about it, how we feel about it. And that doesn't change our relationship or how, because we're still exchanging ideas.
We're exchanging ideas, but again, if like my dad, for example, he was in his like late 60s, and I did tell him, I said, hey, like you should stay at home, avoid crowds, and get the vaccine. Whereas I was telling my friends, like, why are you staying at home? You're like 30 years old
Right.
and you're healthy and you go to the gym and you work out. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not going to this party because of why are you masking up? So that's
Right.
where when you pass,
And you had a measured response. That is the measured response. You saw the data. You knew it was inversely related to age, and then that's how it worked. I mean, so once again, your conclusion it holds water. It has merit to it for
it
sure.
does hold water and has merit, but you had so many people on the radical left coming after people like me who are like, you're spreading misinformation, you're discouraging people from getting the vaccine. Face mask, same thing. Was I anti face mask? Absolutely. I hated them. I couldn't stand them. But there was one face mask, the N95 mask, that actually had way more effectiveness than these nonsense paper masks that had almost 0% effectiveness. So whenever I saw, let's say, a medical professional wearing a paper mask, I'd say, why are you doing that? Like, you're not, maybe to keep like your spit or whatever from falling on a patient, which is why they were created in the first place. I get it, but they were wearing it because of COVID, and I'm like, that doesn't get yourself an N95, or there was a shortage of them, so then get yourself a KN95. I'm not a big. I actually, where I was in my life, I didn't care if I got COVID. I actually wanted to get it, and I don't want to say I tried getting it, but I just went about my life not even thinking about it,
I did too.
and
Yeah.
and I thought, hey, if I get it, good. I got the antibodies and I can move on with my life. I actually didn't get it. It took about 2 years for me to finally get it, and I knew that was the first time I got it because when I did get it, I lost the usual. I lost my taste. I lost my smell. That had never happened before. It took 2 years, and by that point, I had already gotten three vaccines: the two J&Js plus the one Pfizer. So in
I
any
didn't
case,
vaccinate, and I got it at a Cardinals game, I'm pretty certain. My first one, and I breezed through it twice, but I'm telling you, I got all my stuff in line. I got all my supplements in order, and like when I hit it, it was like it was little sore throat here and a little bit of things. I didn't miss a day of work, nothing.
it
And
I didn't miss. It did
and
not
we're
affect
also
my
different
regular day.
biologically. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you and I probably got the same one. It wasn't Omicron, it wasn't Delta. It was like
I
it
got
might have been
Omicron.
Omicron.
I got
Yeah, that's
Omicron.
what I think it was. And it was like very, very very
I mean, I
transmissible,
still
but
felt like shit.
much
Like, don't get
less
me wrong. I felt
strong.
like shit,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
was
I didn't
not.
feel great,
But
and
I
I did
didn't
lose
feel.
taste as well.
But like I actually, which was a mistake looking back. I was like, shit, I'm going to still go for my runs, play tennis. And I did. Looking back, I probably should have taken it easy because that can stress the heart out a little bit after reading about more
Thank
stuff.
God I was
But I was
lazy.
good
I'm
enough.
just
I was good enough to where I could play a full game of tennis and go pretty hard at it and run,
Mhm.
a mile and a half, not wins. Um, so it again, I've had sicknesses that were way worse than that. Way worse. I mean, I had a stomach virus earlier this year that was way worse. I've had headaches that were way worse. So, anyway, going back to the Chinese Communist Party, we've explained how they've infiltrated our system. They are the enemy. We should absolutely put tariffs on their goods. We need to become independent from China. We need to make our own stuff or replace China. I actually liked Obama's TPP, his Trans Pacific Partnership, where you can basically replace China with India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Pakistan, Bangladesh. I mean, there are so many Asian nations out there who are dying to do business with the United States at the same price that China is charging. So I hope that I'm not completely protectionist because that will lead to inflation if you're 100% protectionist. I hope Trump does consider a partnership with these Asian nations to replace China, and we eventually just remove all dependence from China.
let me ask you this because it's going to be the libertarian pushback, and I'm only speaking as a conduit because I'm here to exchange ideas and
Yeah,
just and move the Overton window. I think I would love for you to come on later at another time when you have more time, possibly with an economist about regarding tariffs, because libertarians would say tariffs are taxes on us
yeah. So
because it raises the prices. It's a natural inflationary piece on us. And
so
I'm sure
the
you have a short answer, and I'd love to hear that one, but then maybe we can talk about it some other time as well.
yeah. So Occam's razor. You bring up the Overton window. I'm going to talk about Occam's razor, which is the most logical answer. Usually is the right answer. So with this COVID, the China virus, the most logical answer is, hey, this came from a lab. The most
Oh
logical
yeah,
answer is
100%.
you implement a tariff, and that means the prices of everything. You implement a 10% tariff. That means the prices are going to go up by 10%. Here's why I think it's different. Number one, we did not see inflation during Trump's first term. We did not see any. When I say we did not see any high inflation, we did not see any inflation that was something to be worried about, and
Right.
that's
And to
because
that point, Trump did push back on China with those tariffs.
he
So
did. Those were Chinese tariffs.
I want to clarify that those tariffs were in place under that time,
They were
so
Chinese
we can
tariffs,
talk
and
about
he
this
started
honestly. Right.
immediately in 2017. So you would have thought, okay, by 2019 we should see inflation, and we did not see it. 2020 we saw deflation. It was the opposite. I think tariffs are a small piece of this big pie. You have the deficit.
100%. 100%.
You have the deficit. You have the national debt. You have government spending. You have Federal Reserve interest rates. You have the unemployment rate. You have jobs. You have illegal immigration, undocumented, because they create more inflation, and they create rent inflation, they create housing price inflation. So that is a piece of the pie. Where I think it's different is if Trump gets elected this time around, he is going to come into a situation where the unemployment rate, people aren't talking about this enough. The unemployment rate is now 4.1%. It's above 4%, and it hasn't been this high since the COVID recovery. Um, it hasn't been this high. If you were to take away COVID, it hasn't been this high since Obama's first term. So above 4% unemployment is actually bad. And that number is only going to continue to go up. And I know that for a fact because the interest rates have continued to stay high. I know my Federal Reserve monetary policy really well. Interest rates.
And hold on, let's even take it further than that. We've how many times adjusted how unemployment's measured. If you even went to 1980 standards 40 years ago, we're at 25+%
Probably.
unemployment.
Probably. But I'm just going off
Just
of a
by those
rate of
numbers. And once again,
yeah,
we can judge any number to fit
yeah.
any of the, like I said, to that point, we can judge those numbers. And we've seen them adjust many millions of jobs over the over the many years of Biden's administration, where they had to go back and readjust because they throw out a number. And how many of those are government worthless jobs? I mean, we can go on and on about that, but please continue.
Well, look, we can get into an entire debate on numbers. I don't want to waste our time with that. The bottom line is unemployment is going up and we're not in a good situation because interest rates are
Yes.
elevated. Companies are continuing to lay off. They're on hiring freezes. The tech industry is replacing people with artificial intelligence. So I think it's a little different because we're about to enter a deflationary cycle. Peak inflation was 2 years ago in 2022, and inflation has been cooling since then. And when Trump comes back in, we're going to see the price of oil go back down because one of the first things he's going to do is, as Sarah Palin said, drill, baby, drill, frack, burn coal, maybe embrace nuclear energy. That's going to create a lot of jobs, but it's also going to drive down the price of oil. Because of the high interest rates, we're already seeing a cooling in the housing market. And then once people are being deported, or once people are deported, or that starts, the deportations of millions and millions of people every year. Can't deport everyone, but that's going to create rent deflation. So you're going to see rents not necessarily deflation, but you're going to see housing prices level off, which they already are, and then you're going to see rents leveling off, which they already are. So that's why I say to create inflation, people have to be spending. And if you're entering an economy with rising unemployment, with high interest rates, with a lower population, less population, because you're going to be deporting people out of this country, then I'm not as concerned about tariffs causing inflation in this game. I'm talking about that whole pie over here.
From a whole perspective. That's a very interesting point. I really like
I'm
that.
talking
And
about the whole
like I
pie.
said, maybe we can have a deep dive on that.
And
So I know.
well, one
Oh,
more
go
thing
ahead.
I will say is the last thing, because I brought up the deficit and the debt, and this is where I really hope. I don't know if Trump is going to. I know that he's going to be able to raise revenue through the tariffs. I know he's going to be able to raise revenue through drilling, fracking, burning coal, but we still need to cut costs. And the only way to, not the only way, but one of the only ways to reduce that debt and that deficit is by shutting down agencies. He already said he's going to shut down the Department of Education. That's not enough. That's not anywhere close to being enough. You need to lay off, mass layoffs, shut down agencies, merge agencies, and
Right.
do
And
it in such a way.
what kind of ramifications is that going to do? You're going to flood the market with even more kind of I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it, underachiever type government job
You're going to
people
have
who
what I
fill
call
those
C
positions.
level. The A level, B level people are going to keep
Yep.
their jobs, but the C
Right.
level, D level people. And look, right now there's an 8 million job short. 8 million jobs are available. That's how many not a shortage, a surplus. There are
Yeah,
8 million
surplus.
jobs
Yeah.
that are unfilled in the private sector. So these people can go into the private sector, find honest work, get paid probably more money than what they're getting paid by the government, and they'll probably get a nice exit package from the government too. But this is super, super important. There's no reason for Dick Cheney to take a 10-person vice president department to 600 people. There's no reason for that. Absolutely no reason. Doesn't matter if you're responsible calling all the shots, you're responsible for the Iraq war. 10 people can get it. 10 A-level people can get it done, and technology and artificial intelligence can get a lot done too. And these are all like foreign concepts to the government, and
Right.
this is why
They're
I'm
not caught up
excited.
yet.
This is why I'm excited about
Yeah. Well,
Elon Musk.
I'm more concerned about who's going to have the button on the AI. I'm not concerned about the AI itself. The AI itself is ridiculously amazing.
It is.
How we wield that sword is very important. That's really what's going to determine, and the information, garbage in, garbage out kind of stuff, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really,
And I
really
know you're about
important.
to go. Could I ask you two questions real
Sure.
quick before we
Yeah, yeah,
go?
yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot on one
Hmm.
because we talked about TikTok. What are your thoughts on the ban? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that because I wasn't sure where you were on that, and I'm glad you said that because I think we just need to create a better product, in my opinion, and I think we can. I think we have enough people to do it.
Well, people are going to know
I'm not
why I said
very
no, and the reason why I say no is because it is such an important platform. Yes, the Chinese Communist Party owns it,
okay.
but it is such an important platform. It's the largest social media platform in the world.
It is.
People my age may not understand that, but someone who's 25 will. It is the
Yeah,
largest
they
social
do.
media platform in the world. And to outright ban it, you're going to have a lot of unhappy people. You're going to have people's businesses destroyed because they depend on TikTok, and yes, they're
Right.
depending on it.
Advertising and everything from
And
that.
so
Okay, so it's more of an economic idea on
I
that.
think a better solution would be a forced sale to a U.S. company, which they tried doing already and it didn't work out. Or, like you said, coming out with a competitor. Why can't Trump do it? He's got Truth Social. That the whole point of Trump Media was to come out with another X, another TikTok, another, or merge, not merge, but partner with Rumble. So I don't think banning TikTok is the solution. I do think tariffs, essentially banning China from the Chinese Communist Party from the United States, not Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party. I do think that's important because they are our enemy. They are our number one enemy. They are destroying us. So generally, I'm for free markets and letting people doing business with everybody, but they've got bad intentions.
Well, before we go, thank you so much for your time. I'm really gracious. It's funny how you kind of hunted me down like at Freedom Fest because my head was spinning, man. I didn't know what was going on. You tapped me on the shoulder. We had this great conversation. I'm really grateful. The last question I have, could you please share with me all of your information because we dove right into it because we didn't have much time. So please tell us how we can get hold of you. I understand you run Krish Media, Krish. Is that correct?
Krish Media Marketing. Check out the website, krishmediamarketing.com. You can see everything we do from design and development to social media campaigns, SEO, etc. I'm also a real estate investor and a real estate investment coach. So if you need help with your real estate investing, contact me. I can help you out free of charge. There's no charge. I'll help you for free, help you get started with your portfolio, buying properties. Think of me as a super connector to get you in touch with all the right people. I own 8 properties myself. I've never visited them. They call me a laptop landlord. Run them all from my computer, so I can help you do the same.
That is amazing. And we don't even have enough time to get into all your credentials, but you are such an accomplished gentleman. So thank you for sharing your time with me and your ideas. I think we certainly have much more in common than we have different. But that's where the beauty is that we can talk about those slight differences and tweak our own ideas. You gave me actually a lot of different ideas to think about and from different angles. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation.
Cool. Thank you for joining. You are now officially a member of the Not Conscious family, my friend. We have
Awesome.
Naresh Vissa. Thank you so much, sir. I'm going to hit end here, but stick around just for 1 second, okay?
1, 2, 3, 4. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really